Alright, people. Let's see. Are we live? Un momento, un momento. Let me check this out. What the hell's my phone doing? Alright, I think we is live. One moment. Alright, so let me just see. Look at that, I can hear myself. Alright, inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا وحوانيing later bienvenidos a todos خوش آمدید and swagatam people swagatam. Right, so Ustad Muhammad أهلا وسهلا بك. عمر الحلاق وسيم Allah हुजूर आप आप और यहाँ. So salam from across the pond. Allah, hola, ¿qué tal? Muy bien, y tú Lolito, ¿qué pedo? Alright, so salam from the Philippines. People, we are international. Well, Allah did say in the Quran, فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, go international. And hence, we went international. So, that was just following the commandment. Let me act all, let me put it down to just religious humbleness. This is how religious folk do it, you know. It's just, I was just being humble, you know, brother. I was being humble, you know. Alright, folks, so what's going on? Asim Awan, you're doing it. You know what, Asim Awan? I like your memes, you know. They crack me up, honestly. You got an awesome sense of humor there. Koyas, hola desde Nueva York. Alright, orale, people, New York. Heavy Mujahada, 1 a.m. in South Africa. Wow. Ahlan wa sahlan, people. Much love, right? All of you, man. Stay blessed. May Allah keep you all smiling and forever laughing. Right? Your love and courtesy is too much, on a serious note. Shukran. Dearly appreciated. It's, you know, it's good to see there's not just hate out there. And people, take from me, no matter what people tell you, laughter, there's never enough of it, right? A moment spent in laughter is never a moment wasted. Right, so, have I seen the Sunni Defense's new video? Oh, my friend. Fariduddin, Baba Fariduddin Ganguteli. Ganguteli and his crew, they've made a video clip on me. You know, my friend, you know, my friend. Wabi defense friend. These guys are obsessed. I have to say, I watched that clip and I was really going through a cognitive dissonance, you know. I was going through truly mixed emotions. They must have, it's for those of you that haven't seen it, they made some clip called something like, "This is Abu Layth's Islam," something like that. And in it, what they're trying to say is that his Islam isn't really Islam, it's just his twisted version of Islam. And in his Islam, everything is halal, more or less, right? So that's what they're trying to say. Now, but the interesting thing is this clip that they had was, it was about 10 minutes long or more or so, and it was like just 10-second clips. So many of them. I was truly flattered that somebody's diligently watched at least, they must have watched anything between 100 to 150 hours of me. I mean, to get those clips, because now we're approaching almost 100 Monday Nights with Mufti. This is almost, I think, in the next 2 weeks or so. And each show is something around, perhaps short of 2 hours. They must have watched at least 100 to 150 hours of me. I mean, even I don't watch that much of me. So they're in some ways a greater fan of me than me. I'm like confused. I'm like having conversations with myself like, what is happening? Like, I mean, I feel indebted to these people. Seriously, they must have watched so many of my clips, and then they've taken out just so many like 10-second clips and compiled them together. But basically the most controversial of stuff that you could find, and I'm sure that's not difficult when it comes to me. All right, Ubaid, Maj, Deborah, all right, Ahlan wa Sahlan, Abu Mu'adh. Those of you just tuning in, click like, click share, people. Let others join in to this blessed fun, right? So, yeah, so I watched through it, and it basically said things like, halal, what is halal? So they had like a category. No, it began with festivals. And so I'm saying Halloween, there's nothing wrong in Halloween from an Islamic perspective. And then I'm saying there's nothing wrong with Valentine's Day. And I'm saying there's nothing wrong with saying Merry Christmas to non-Muslims. And they just compound the whole, there's all these combos of like, it's like one of so many 64-hit combo, non-stop. And so most of the stuff, I mean, 1-2 of the things may be entirely distorted, but I think in general, a lot of the stuff they're saying, it's not that I didn't say that stuff, but it had a greater, like the video had an explanation to what I was saying. There were 1-2 things that they just cut short that I wasn't actually saying, but I was just saying that this is within, that there is this difference of opinion. And so, for example, some of the things like they cut short, which they didn't do justice to. So there was things like the virgin birth of Jesus. So they just focused on this thing of who says the Virgin Mary, that we as Muslims don't have this term, the Virgin Mary. But they made it sound like, the way they cut and paste it is that though I was saying that as though Mary was never ever in her life a virgin. Like they just cut out a small, which is not what I was saying. I mean, evidently anybody who watched the thing, what I was saying is that this title, this kind of honorific, the Virgin Mary, is not something Islamic. Like we as Muslims don't remember Mary as the Virgin Mary. This is a very Catholic thing. And the Catholics believe that Virgin, or many of them believe that Mary remained a virgin throughout her life. Whereas the Bible mentions, the Gospels mention that Jesus had brothers and sisters. So that's, and other Christians accept that. So that was my point, that we don't call Maryam al-Batul. But so that was 1-2 like that distorted things, but generally the other things are obviously I have said them, but there was a greater context, that's all. But it was fun to watch. It was fun to watch, I gotta say. I was watching it just laughing my head off. so hilarious sometimes to watch these things. And you know what's interesting is right, so the green light in the bedroom. I had said that, you know, according to the school of Medina, once a couple are behind closed doors, it's all a green light zone. That's what they had the clip of me saying that. And they're like, Astaghfirullah. They're having all these taqwa attacks. I mean, how is intimacy with these people then? Is it like they all wear a thobe and they stand there and like, I will now, by He in the heavens, I will now approach with my right hand, and now I will apply the left hand. For now, verily, I swear unto thee that. I mean, how does it? I don't know how it is with these people. So they're all worked up that why did I say something like that? I mean, I've got a whole detailed explanation to stuff like that. That is the school of Medina. I mean, you don't need to like it, you don't need to agree with it, but it is what it is. I mean, you can have your restrictions. Just because other people don't follow them doesn't make them any less Islamic. So we have this misunderstanding that to be strict means you are closer to God. But why? Where did that understanding come from? Why is strictness equated to a proximity to God, a closeness to God? Why does that translate as that? It doesn't to me. It translates to me strictness as somebody who perhaps doesn't trust himself, or somebody who has some OCD, obsessive. You know, they have a very neurotic, not erotic, neurotic personality trait. That's what it translates to mean. Which doesn't surprise me that many religious people do have a high tendencies of a neurotic personality kind of traits, because it doesn't surprise me, that doesn't. But cool, that's what I'm saying. So people, look, this is everything I had said from the Quran and Sunnah, and from the opinions of scholars of this ummah. I didn't make it up, I didn't pull it out of a hat. You know, so it's just they don't like it. They want those opinions to be forgotten. But then every once in a while, a fitna like me emerges. And you know something, I want to highlight a point. They made a point about this gold, yeah? Now, about men wearing gold. Now, I wanted to say something. I'm actually glad they made that, they highlighted, because what they did is they played a clip of mine from about a year and a half ago, in which I'm asked about gold, and I say that, look, I'm not aware of any difference of opinion, and therefore this is haram as far as I'm aware for men, wearing gold. And then they've played a clip perhaps within the last 6 months, or maybe at the end of last year, where I state that gold, in my understanding, that there is a difference of opinion. But they don't play the whole clip, they just play that short kind of cut and paste. Alright, so they just, sorry, I'm just trying to, right, okay, it's freezing on me. Right, so they just play the short cut and paste kind of snippet, but in the entire clip, if they played it, I do mention that I had come across the discussion of Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, a great legendary scholar who everybody accepts, where he highlights that there were at least 5, the difference of opinion, and speaks of at least 5 companions who not only believed that gold was permissible for men, but died wearing gold. Now, you see, so if you go back to my first clip, it is visible, and if you watch that whole discussion and other discussions around that time, that I was struggling, but I didn't know any difference of opinion on it. And to me, this is actually proof. You see, like these people say, I follow my desires. If that be the case, I want you to pay attention to this, and hopefully, I know they will definitely be watching me, right? That if I followed my desires 1.5 years ago, or 2 years ago, when I gave that first ruling, I was still saying the other rulings were very similar. I was saying Halloween was okay, I was saying these things. So if I was simply following my desires, I would have at that stage said it was halal, like I don't care. But the fact that I said it was haram, and only when I came across the evidence of 5 companions dying wearing gold, looking into that dialogue, I realized that actually, you know, that this has a huge discourse. And how can it be that this be haram and the companions had this belief? And then I changed my view. But if it was simply about following desires, I would have said it in the beginning. I would have said, well, I don't give a damn, it's halal. But the fact that I didn't declare it halal, whilst I was declaring other things halal, is a testimony to the fact that I am following evidence. I'm not like just sitting here following my desires. Because if I was, then I would just, 2 years ago, you would have had the same ruling. So, you know, when you see my rulings change, it is because my understanding of that topic has developed. Because I've stumbled across a dialogue on it, a deeper discussion. I've learned something that I didn't know. That my learning hasn't stagnated. So, you know, that to me, that I'm really glad they demonstrated that. To them, that they were kind of mocking that as in, ha ha ha, he changed. To me, it was celebratory. It was something to celebrate that my learning had enhanced, that I had come across. And it's testimony to the fact that I wasn't just following desires. Because if I was, you know, why only say that after I come across the hadith that show it? So, yeah. No, I mean, somebody said, what do they want? Do they want an apology? No, an apology? What the hell? An apology for what? Have they been wrongly touched academically? There's no apology. They're just obsessed. You see, I can have that effect on people. That for some reason, I have like this Marmite effect. That people either love me or hate me. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground. There's always like, it's got to always be wild. It's never just mundane. And so, and those who hate me, they become obsessed with me. That's what I found. You know, it could be worse. They could be women. And then there would be something really juicy to talk about. But I found that they really get obsessed with me, man. It's amazing. It's amazing. So, what else is going on, people? What else? Let's, in a hadith who complained about, why did Muhammad tell his companion who complained to him about his wife, instead to just enjoy her? Why did... sorry, let me just... I must be having a dyslexic moment. In a hadith, why did Muhammad tell his companion who complained to him about his wife she did not prevent the hand of a man who touched her, instead to just enjoy her? Why did Muhammad tell... Right, so what I'm understanding from here... What I'm understanding from this question... Right, sorry, let me just grab the name of the person. Fazlu Karime. Karime. Okay, we'll carry you. Right, okay, right. Right, no, that's not the imperative to carry him, people. Fazlu, we're not here to carry Fazlu, but let's deal with the question. Right, so there is a hadith that many scholars bring as certain evidences and things like this, and Ibn Rushd brings it as well, and discussion on the hadith aside, but let's just go with the fact that the hadith be valid. So in this hadith, a person comes and he says to the Prophet that he comes to complain about his wife. And he says that she's very, she can be flirtatious. Let's be charitable with our words, shall we? She may be flirtatious. So she can flirt with other men. And not that she does, presumably. She's like, when she's out there doing her work, she gets carried away, with the flirtation, So in this hadith, the term he uses, he says to the Prophet that innaha la taruddu yada lamis. So whilst this flirtatious air is about, people may kind of touch her, and she doesn't repel them or push them. It's as though she kind of doesn't mind it, enjoys the attention. So, and I suppose the hadith doesn't necessarily say that they sleep with her or anything, but it says that they, they may kind of try to touch her and stuff like this, and she doesn't repel them, she doesn't kind of reprimand them. In fact, the hadith doesn't clearly state, but it implies as though she may enjoy that attention that she gets from men. Now the question, and obviously this is not something she's doing on a day. I'm not saying all the time she's just sitting there, standing there, and men are just going by. But this is presumably something that must have happened on, on more than one occasion. The husband must have found out that, okay, this happens. So he comes to complain to the Prophet, and the Prophet says that divorce her. Now, I, for one, find this hadith very helpful. I find this, putting aside the discussion of its validity, let's just momentarily go with it being valid. I find the content of this hadith to be very pragmatic and real, like from a realist, pragmatist perspective. Because the Prophet offers layers of advice. The person comes to the Prophet and he's complaining. You see, the thing is, when people come to complain about something, more often than not, the person assumes that they want advice. And this is still the case. So when people tell you about something, they usually want a solution. They want you to advise them. So the assumption here was that this person is distraught, which he was, but he can't put up with her now. So he tells the Prophet that, look, innaha la taruddu yada lamis. She doesn't, people flirt with her. She flirts back sometimes, and they touch her and stuff like this. And the Prophet said, well, okay, part ways. Fine, the relationship's over. It's over. There's no, you see, and I find that very real, very down to earth advice. And then he says, walakinni uhibbuha. You see, but I love her. The charm of women, huh? Hi. What? They have a way with the hearts of men, huh? He's like, but it's low. Humka low ho gaya hai, low. I is in love. So he says, but I love her. Ya salam. Oh. Bedili kya यूं ही दिन गुजर जाएंगे. Without love, is this how days will just go by? यूं ही जिंदा रहे तो मर जाएंगे. As the poet says, if this is how life will just be, then that life will be the death of us. Allah. So he says to the Prophet that, look, but I love her. Lakinni uhibbuha. I love her. Then, so the Prophet says, exactly, यहाँ पे बबुआ लाओ का मामला हो गया है, लाओ का. So the Prophet says to him, fine, then stay with her. I mean, you see, now at some levels, to some people, that may be like, what? You know, like the uber religious, or maybe like the kind of robotic people might be like, what do you mean, stay with her, she flirts? But this, you see, if you peel away this superficiality, this kind of superficial nature, there is an incredibly profound lesson that the Prophet was imparting. That look, when you are with certain people, their personality is their personality. Now, you either will not tolerate it and part ways, or if you really want them, they will be the way they are. Like it's your choice, but there is no force in this matter. Now one could say, Astaghfirullah, the Prophet, how did the Prophet allow this? This is immoral. You know, some of these people who have their taqwa above the taqwa of the Prophet. Like some of our holy lot nowadays, some of our mullahs. So this is, but look at the Prophet's advice. The Prophet's advice is so real that look, people are who they are. Now you may, you know, it is what it is. Like what more can you want? Like either you are with this person and there will be these problems, but what can you do? The Prophet never said, oh my God, sit her down and, you know, like this is, you better give her a lecture on this and lecture on that and lecture. I'm not saying this behavior was generally kind of the advised behavior. But what it is that people already know what's right and wrong. You see, people know what is right and wrong. They don't need a lecture. You know, it's not like I'm just saying, if somebody is stealing and you say, well, oh, stealing's haram. I say, oh, what? It's haram? Oh, whoa, I didn't know it's haram. I mean, I thought it might be like makruh, but it's haram. Okay, then I'll stop doing it. Said nobody ever. That's not how it works. People already know what's right. They know what's wrong. So the question is that, you see, be real with people. There are certain people who, so the Prophet was advising the person that, look, if you really love her, then if she does change, this will be a long journey. It will be a real life, a human, all too human journey. But it's your choice. You don't have to take that journey. You know, you can part ways now. You can say, I can't put up with this. I'm out of here. Or you can say, well, look, you know what, it's for me, I will try to work this. But that's, you see, to me, this advice that the Prophet gave, if this hadith be sahih, we're going with the hypothesis that this is sahih, the content is very real and amazing. That it was not one of preaching. It was not one of trying to talk down to the congregation. It was a very real, down-to-earth, pragmatic word of counsel that, look, listen, either go your own way, or if you love her and you're saying you love her, then fine. But this is what it is. It is what it is. Like, what more can a person say? So to me, I find the content of the hadith very fascinating. The discussion on the sanad is a different thing, but I actually find this very, in some ways, comforting for a confused world that we have. Hadith like this, teachings like this sometimes are very comforting for the kind of chaos we have in society. They provide a real, not a kind of utopian, but a real down-to-earth, a human, all too human response to a chaotic environment that we have. Right, so what else is going down, people? What else? Oh, right, so we've had Sinead O'Connor. All right, people. Embrace Islam. Alhamdulillah. You know, may Allah guide each and all to him and to this blessed faith. But so this has been all over people's social media that Sinead O'Connor has embraced Islam, and everybody wants to show it off. And you see, alhamdulillah, it's good, it's amazing. I am ever so increasingly fascinated by how people convert to Islam. I'm not going to lie, given the kind of mess that Muslims are in. I find it amazing, and I'm, you know, astonished and in awe of these people who make that wonderful choice. And, you know, may Allah bless them and everybody. But my concern is more that, you see, nobody really seems to care. It's more about a trophy kind of, like we're running a trophy competition. Like, oh, somebody embraced Islam, wow, you know, look, hey, people, Muslim. And everybody wants to boast. But the truth is that many Muslims would just either deem that convert to be a kafir by the end of the week. They'd just call it, perhaps, okay, let's stretch it, let's be charitable, 2 weeks, right? So by the end of 2 weeks, they will probably have called her a kafir anyway, because her aqidah is messed up, or she did the adhan, how dare a woman do the adhan, how dare a woman, because she'll probably speak about women's rights or something, and then they'll be like, how dare a woman speak this, you know, what a kafir, what a murtadda, so many Muslims are just going to declare her to be, I mean the religious kind, are going to declare her to be a deviant kafir by the end of 2 weeks anyway. We have like a 28-day refund. It's like, don't worry, you've got 14 days grace period, and then we can extend it to 28 days. Don't worry about it, you know. You murtadda. So they're going to either chuck her out of Islam, or they're going to make her hate Islam so much that she herself will just gladly walk out. And then they're going to threaten her that she deserves to be killed. This is the situation that we have. So, you know, like, I think to myself sometimes, I'm just wowed by these people that, subhanallah, that they still embrace the message, that they don't look at Muslims and they look at Islam, alhamdulillah. And then I'm kind of almost, you know, in dismay to how Muslims in general treat the whole concept of Muslims leaving Islam. There are thousands of people leaving Islam. Thousands, literally. Thousands and thousands globally. Right? Leaving Islam all the time. Nobody really cares. This is the disappointing thing. So this is my point. You know, they said on that video that Mufti isn't, you know, that he said that what's the point of da'wah? Because I'm honest, what is the point of da'wah? Because we are so obsessed on just chucking people out of Islam and threatening Muslims. I've probably been, I don't know, hundreds of times declared kafir by these very same Muslims, by these very kind of Muslim people. I mean, me, a born Muslim who studied Islam, will easily be declared a kafir. I mean, that's somebody, what do you think of regular people? Like, to me, I've memorized the Quran. I, you know, studied the sciences of Islam. I studied the Sharia. I studied Hadith cover to cover. I gained more ijazat and actual chains of transmissions going back to the Prophet than these people would ever have in their lifetime. I gained authorization and a license in being able to contribute to Islamic law, fatwa, as a mufti. Yet, despite that, people will say, he's a kafir. So, regular Muslims have no chance. No chance. You know, there's no chance, you know, for regular Muslims. No chance, people, no chance. So, this is why I'm not all down with this da'wah. Like, I don't see the point of it. People come in, you bring them in single units, and you drive them out in hundreds. Like, what's the point? It's just about control. It's just about... And this is the thing, isn't it? People generally don't... It's, I suppose, our human inadequacies, our human hypocrisies, I guess. Like, let's just look at the world situation. Muslims will always go on about certain things. Muslims will bend over backwards to kiss the behind of Saudi Arabia all the time. And, you know, and they will at times, fair enough, so Muslims will always speak about Palestine, the suffering, fine, there is suffering there, and to speak about it, but nobody will address, for example, what's happening in Yemen. Nobody cares. That's the truth, that nobody cares. It's Muslim on Muslim violence. Saudi Arabia is bombarding Yemen. They are undergoing one of the worst famines in recent times. Nobody cares. It's not even an issue. It's a non-issue. And this is... So this is my point. Everything is always... It's always just whatever the popular narrative is. So the popular narrative is to say Palestine, Palestine. And the popular narrative is to say certain things and just be in line with that. It's not about the humanitarian cause. Nobody cares about humanity. Nobody cares about... This is my point. Nobody cares about Islam really and Muslims. They just want some trophies. Oh, here's Cat Stevens. He's a celebrity. And mashallah, he's an amazing person. But as an example, he's a celebrity. He embraced Islam. Here's Sinead O'Connor. She embraced it. These are some trophies that we have. Oh, but whilst thousands of people will leave Islam, nobody cares. And these religious people will chase them out with whips. Right? This is the state. And so, hence, I'm not down with this kind of da'wah. And I've said, and with Sinead O'Connor, I have said that, alhamdulillah, seriously, I was so glad to learn that she's in Ireland, where there is Sheikh Omar Al-Qadri, and she's under his kind of, as in, I don't know whether it's supervision or tutelage, but she has under his guidance. And I was kind of like, I took like a breath of like some solace there, that alhamdulillah, because he's a down-to-earth person at least. He's somebody with some insight, with hikmah, with wisdom. He's not going to be, somebody like that, at least, she's in safe hands, alhamdulillah. Because other people, and I saw some tweets, some people saying, oh, what's Sinead O'Connor doing with a deviant like Omar Al-Qadri? She ought to be with like true Islamic scholars like Asim Al-Hakim. For God's sake, seriously, Asim Al-Hakim, are you having a laugh? What? This is Aqid. This is the Sharia. He, by no standards, I mean, he may be a scholar if you put him in if we're gauging by special needs standards. So by those standards, like if we're looking at what makes somebody eligible for disability welfare benefits like that, then by those standards, he could be a scholar of Islam. By any other standard, I don't know what the hell makes him a scholar. Is it just the fact that he's got a beard and he's from Saudi, Al-Mamlakat Al-Arabiyyat Al-Saudiya, and he can kiss the behind of the royal family 10 times a day? Is that what makes him a scholar? I don't know. What makes this guy a scholar? Have you ever heard some of the stuff that this guy has said? He's the same one with Rihanna and whatever. Wasn't it Rihanna or was it Beyonce? But it was the one with the Saudi royal who was in a pool with her, and whilst he's condemning some other women, for haram, haram, haram. Somebody said, oh, what do you call this? Is this okay Islamically? Is this haram? Is this zina? Or whatever. And you've got the royal prince or whoever he was in some kind of jacuzzi with her, with this celebrity. And he said, no, that's just hanging out. I mean, they can call people like me corrupt. They can call people like me deviants. But at least we're consistent. You know, if I was to slate the royal family, I'd slate them. I don't give a damn about the kingdom of Saud. If I was to speak against somebody, I would speak against them. You won't get me kind of like, you know, wavering and trembling in my tone. At least I'll be consistent. Where I see something, either I don't deem it haram, but if I do, I will condemn it. You know, I'm not going to shy away and like, royal family. And then take out all, you know, when it comes to the royal family, kiss their behind. And when it comes to the Muslim ummah, throw them into hell. You know, but my point of saying this is that is of compassion. We should be more compassionate. But let's take some questions, people. What is going on? What is going on? There would be no Saudi Arabia without Britain. Did the Prophet say nationalism stinks? I don't know. The Prophet didn't say nationalism stinks because nationalism didn't really exist in the time of the Prophet because there were no nation states. There is a fabricated or a very weak hadith that hubbul watan min al iman, that loving your homeland is not the same, by the way, as nationalism, but it's like loving your homeland. Is from iman. That hadith is not valid by any the chain. However, the meaning, I can understand it to have some wisdom in that kind of meaning. So the general message of the hadith, I do find it to be found within the Islamic living tradition, although it's not a hadith. So the general understanding is one should be kind of proud of their qawm, of their people. They shouldn't be kind of like that racism doesn't exist like that, but they should be a want to invest and to help where you live, have ta'awun. And like all prophets were really sent to focus just on their own people, for example, because there was that they were them, they were of their homeland. So hence I've said things in the past that we as Muslims in Britain should take Britain always as our homeland, like we should be, and charity should begin at home within Britain. That's not to say that other disasters can't be looked at. They can be worldwide, but we should also be as equally concerned about the issues at home. So if there was a flood here, Muslims, if Muslim charities have the funds, then they should be helping. They shouldn't be thinking, well, these people ain't Muslims, so they don't score high, because this is our home. Right, so do you feel the whole Mulvi system needs reform? The whole Mulvi system is, you know, it's not that, look, I differentiate between scholars of Islam and between this kind of clergy that has emerged. And there is an overlap between the two. I accept that there are many clergy people who are scholars, and there are many who aren't really scholars. They're just clerics, as in they've just been through a system, and that's probably most of them. Now, the clergy represent the institutionalization of religion. So they are a very controlling phenomenon. They are about controlling people, about always having people under manners, under wraps. It's a very ancient system to control people, to blackmail them emotionally, to gain support, to gain money from them, to gain... There's a lot of this in this, to gain power from them. And some people say there's some people who don't gain money. Maybe, but they gain power and stuff like this. And then scholars, and there are scholars from amongst them, but scholars are people who are familiar with the system, like with the sciences of Islam. They've studied Islam. but they ought to be really objective, independent, and they ought to be critical in a helpful way. That is my understanding of a true, and we do have this system within Islam, a very critical system. In fact, I think the whole Millat Ibrahim, when Abraham began his mission, he began it with critical reasoning, with critical thought. His whole thing in the Quran, where he's calling people to look at the stars and saying, yep, you're right, you worship these stars. There is this, the whole the whole astrology and stuff like this. Now, he's saying, yes. And then he says, oh, but wait, the stars seem to set. I thought if a God was all powerful, how would he set? And then he's like, you're right, the moon is a god. And, and then he's like, oh, wow, the moon, it sets as well. It disappears. I thought God never disappears. And the sun, and he's calling them, he's critiquing with critical thought their belief systems. Like they believe in these statues, and he breaks them and puts the axe with the big statue and says, well, logic would say that he did it because he's got the axe. Forensic site, you see, CSI says, well, the murder weapon is with the big statue. So, and then they're like, don't be bloody stupid. Statues don't do. And you see, when they say aloud, they feel stupid. They're like, statues can't do things. But so, you see, so this whole critical, and we are Millat Ibrahim. So yeah, so that's reply Huzaifa Ismail. So was Imam Malik misguided then? What's that about? History of Islam, licentious behavior controls, oil is... I can't see what the question is. Right, why does unnecessary cruelty exist in the animal kingdom? Right, that question has just gone. I'm just trying to get it back. Un momento. Sabran fi majal al-maut. Sabran fama nail al-khuludi bimustata'i. That's a poem in Arabic, that have patience in this path of death. He's talking about it's en route to war. So he says, have patience. Sabran fi majal al-maut. Sabran fama nail al-khuludi bimustata'i. That attaining eternity on earth is not something that we're capable of anyway. Alright, Farhan is online. Alright, people. Why did Muhammad command his two wives to observe parda in front of the blind man? Live fulmic. That is a weak hadith. It is unacceptable. It is not true. The hadith that you are referring to, that the Prophet said to his two wives that Afa amyawani antuma, that were you two blind, even though he was blind, a blind man came to their house, why didn't you do hijab? That hadith is false. Why is there unnecessary cruelty in the animal kingdom, e.g. parasites eating insects and animals alive? Zach, you see, that is interesting, but you see, the thing about nature is it has a system which allows it to progress and survive. Nature has you're right, it has a brutality to it. But that brutality is it is the cogworks. It is the cogs in the wheel of life. You see, evolution requires a kind of struggle to survive. That's how life, the formidable nature of life, exerts itself in competition, rivalry, and adversity against others. It is, and in many ways there is, to quote here, that there is, grandeur in this view of life. That's to quote Charles Darwin. That there is grandeur in this way of life. But it really is that, like, when you see the struggle, that these things are part of that system. I don't believe these things to be on that higher level of consciousness in that sense. But you're right, it is brutal and very scary to sometimes become aware of, cognizant of that. Wow. But it's also amazing in many ways. I know I say that in a you're probably thinking, this guy is seriously disturbed. And you won't be wrong. I need to resume my psychotherapy sessions. Well, counsellor, what are my thoughts? The counsellor himself, the psychotherapist, will need therapy after they realize what's going on in my head. But the question is that, you know, by observing animals, it is so amazing how much we can learn. In fact, there's a professor who has some amazing books, and other people as well. De Waal, what's his? Is it France? Or is it France De Waal? Right. So now he has a few books. One, Philosophers and Primates, and he has another one, The Baboon and the Atheist. Now, it's really interesting, and he has some other works as well, and he has certain lectures on YouTube, and other people as well. They've observed primates, like some of these primatologists, what they've done is spent an incredible amount of time observing primates, and it's what's come to light is how primates also go by some form, a lower level of kind of ethics. And it's really interesting, a kind of low level, a kind of primordial morality that animals have. Yes, France de Waal with W-A-A-L. Now, you see, so they've realized that monkeys, for example, the great apes, they have these 4 key tendencies. Like, they have empathy, so that they have the ability to recognize structures, hierarchy. So primates and other animals as well have a hierarchical system by which they live. There is the alpha, and there's certain structures, and they have to actually win votes to get to the higher structures. But so they have the ability to not only perceive and learn these hierarchies, but to adapt to them, to the social realities. That they have an ability. What the great apes have is reciprocity. To kind of, you see, they do things. So for example, apes share food with certain apes, where they will get something in return. And they will do things like, like if a particular ape wants to, a particular monkey from the great apes wants to become alpha, he will do things like pet certain, baby monkeys and kind of like groom the other apes and pat them and spend time with them. It's really weird. It's like these politicians when they go around and they like pick up a baby and they're like, yeah, Obama's over here or wherever they are. And as an example, in the media, and these different presidents and prime ministers and parliamentarians, to get their positions, apes do actually the same kind of thing in their environment to get to the top of the tribe. And they get kind of voted, like the rest of them just agree. It's not might is right. You would think that with things like gorillas or monkeys, or that might is right, and it's not. It's actually not often the strongest monkey in the clan, in the tribe, to be the alpha. So it's really interesting. And then the fourth thing that they have is peacemaking. So you will see many monkeys, they will try to sometimes break off a fight
between two monkeys. So they will go and remove the pelts and the stones from the hands of one of them. Or if when a monkey has lost a fight, they will console him. Because why do they console? Because there is this understanding that the group mustn't have too much kind of discord, because that is harmful for the group. And it's really interesting learning this in primates, because it shows, and things like, so for example, when monkeys have been put under certain tests, that if they were given certain food, it would mean that the other monkey would get an electric shock. So if this monkey was given food, if he chose to take the food, let's say he presses the button, he gets the food, the other monkey gets an electric shock. Many monkeys would starve themselves for days just so the other monkey doesn't get an electric shock. And that is empathy. And it's really interesting. And just as they will get angry if they feel, so let's say there are two monkeys who in this experiment, and one is being given grapes and they like grapes, and this monkey is being given cucumbers, but he can see that monkey is getting a grape, but he only gets a cucumber. He will throw a tantrum because he will feel that that's not fair. That why does he get a grape and I get a... You see, and that is a low level of morality, of feeling that there must be some fairness. You understand? You can only react like that if you could contemplate the concept of fairness to some low degree. So what's interesting with all of this kind of primatological study is that it shows that in the animal kingdom there is this low level of morality that may have served as the building blocks for insan and his morality. Although our morality is much more complex, but it shows that there may be an innate kind of structure, the same way, a kind of universal base morality, the same way we have a universal base grammar to learn language. And I find that incredibly fascinating. I've just downloaded some of those books, and there's other material I'm going through that. I love Audible, by the way. I'm more a very listening kind of person. I love listening to things. Or some might just say lazy. Right, so would you say the people of the book still exist today, excluding Muslims? Yes, of course. I find this whole people of the books thing very interesting, because what was the purpose of these people of the book? The people of the book was a way to build bridges. I think not only does that exist, but maybe it can be extended. Because, you see, you could say the people of the book were, you know, the Jews and the Christians, but then in the text it's extended to the Majus, the Zoroastrians, the Persians. You see, that's interesting, because the Persian dynasty, which was such a superpower, and the Christians who were there were a superpower as well, and Islam primarily focused on them because of the shared heritage. But then it started to extend it to the Persians, and in many ways the Persians went on to perhaps help Islam and Muslims much more than the Christians ever did, because Muslims kind of took all the administrative structures from the Persians. As the Persians came under Islam, Muslims inherited their kind of aristocracy and their whole system of how to run things. Hence the Abbasids were much more developed than the Umayyads, because the Abbasids kind of welcomed the Persian, that kind of Persianization of the administration. But so I find that really interesting, and I think in this day and age we ought to be able to, with ijtihad, extend that further, because in the Prophet's time the main adversary that was polluting the minds of people with superstition was shirk and the mushrikeen. It was not necessarily the Zoroastrians, and it was not the Persians, and it was not the Christians or the Jews that were polluting the minds of people with superstition. So the main adversary was kind of set there, the ideological adversary, and then with the others, bridges were built. And I think in many ways the narrative has today changed, and we ought to kind of be revisiting some of these things. I think that's me, in my understanding, Allahu A'lam. The problem is today Muslims ourselves have become the main problem to Tawheed. We've become the people of superstition. The irony is Muslims today are the people of superstition. So we believe in so much superstition, it's shocking. It's like we believe in all sorts, you know. It's like, magic, demons, bad omens, don't do this on this day, don't do this on that day, you know, like we are so full of superstitions. So that's disappointing. And in many ways, I know this is going to sound really shocking, but in many ways the new age kind of critical atheists and people like this in many ways resemble the first age Muslims and Muwahideen, the people of Tawheed. Because what these people are doing is what the early Muslims were doing. They were critiquing tradition, they were critiquing superstition, and it's just, it's amazing. I think, like, wow. Let's take some questions, people. Let's take some questions. And the leader of Zoroastrian, yes, of course, I mean the Zoroastrian Zarathustra, and the whole thing, thus spake Zarathustra. I mean, I do believe maybe, of course, he may have been a prophet, just as many of these other people, prominent figures around the world, were prophets. Does bleeding or falling asleep invalidate wudu? Bleeding to death. So the bad news is he's dead, but the good news is he's still got wudu. What? I thought you guys would be at least happy with the good news, no? Talk about pessimists. Right, so no, I mean bleeding or falling asleep doesn't invalidate wudu. Oh, sorry. Wait. I need to sober up. Sorry. Falling asleep does invalidate wudu. Bleeding doesn't. Falling asleep, as in proper sleep. You know, like, I don't mean just like on a bus but I mean proper kind of like out of it like that. Asleep, that breaks wudu. And yes, death does break wudu as well. Why has the PR strategy stepped up a couple of gears for Tablighi Jamaat? When did saint culture get introduced? Do you find any part of the apocalyptic narrative or prophecies in Orthodox Islam compelling and definitely connected to the prophetic tradition? You see, these are some very fascinating questions. I think that a lot of the apocalyptic things, I don't think they're authentic, generally speaking. I think they're more kind of, they're more in line with what human beings generally carry as a narrative of the apocalypse. I think some of them are there. I do find that, I'm sure that some of these things were definitely had some substance to them. They were genuine. They were words of the Prophet. Some of them, like things like that, you know, that a time will come when there will be confusion or there will be stuff like this, which I would say pretty much we live in it regardless today. But and just general things. But I really find fascinating. You see, the problem with apocalyptic narratives is they're pessimistic. They're kind of doom and gloom. They're kind of like Dostoevsky. They're kind of like all very, you just want to slit your wrists and a bit death metal kind of like, just bleed and die. And like, so what I find fascinating is the hadith about the apocalypse, which I do feel are true, that the Prophet said that the final hour will come and one of you will be planting a plant. And he said that the hour will establish, meaning the apocalypse will be upon him, the end of time. And he said, فَلْيَزْرَعْ, let him continue to plant. And he said that one of you will be eating a morsel of food, eating some food, and the hour will be upon him. And he said, and let him continue eating. You see, I find those things very, because they're very positive. They are all about positivity and about moving forward. Like, do what you have to do in this world. See it through. They're not like doom and gloom and all about this, oh, the world's going to end and everybody's just crying and, all Muslims are going to... And I think we inherited a lot of that from Christians, from the Jewish community, and some from other people as well. So that's as far as that is concerned. As to the description in the Quran about when the world comes to an end, that how, let's say, planets will collide and stuff like this. I mean, that kind of stuff is when, let's say, the universe has collapsed in on itself and there's destruction. That kind of stuff is true. But that's not to take away from... Human beings will probably be all cease to exist by that point. But the point is that how do we move forward? Like, I watched this clip recently of Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. I think it's an old clip, but it was surfaced. I mean, it was doing the rounds recently, where he was saying that he was speaking of like sci-fi, and he said that in the Muslim world there is no sci-fi, like there is no Star Wars or stuff like this, because Muslims have become almost incapable of thinking of a future. Like, we are just stuck in a nostalgic past, a Bollywood, that's my word, a Bollywood version, a highly romanticized version of the past. Like, oh, our past was so epic. Oh, our past was so epic. What past was epic? I mean, the people who say that usually have not studied history. But we're so stuck in this that we're not a people of the future. We're not a people that think of like sci-fi or think of things like this. And that's why Hamza Yusuf was saying that, it's impossible for things like Star Wars and these things to fly in the Muslim world, because our minds are so shut off. Like, we think, but the world's going to end. What's the point? Right, so let's take a look. Right, there were some other interesting questions there. I've just forgotten. I guess for those guys, it's a step up from banging. What the hell is that comment? Right, so how about Muslims smelling that sweet fragrance to death? I'm not sure what that means. She was not young. Mufti has a very long video on age. Right, the age of Aisha. Okay, let's talk a bit about the age of Aisha, people. Age of Aisha radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet, right, with the title The Mother of the Believers. You see, somebody sent me a clip of Sheikh Omar Suleiman and the Yaqeen Institute. So they have been doing a project for, I'm not sure whether it's all of 2018 or a huge part of 2018, I don't know, but they've been doing a project on the age of Aisha, and they've ran something like, so I just watched his summary khutbah. He's got like a sermon, it's on social media, and Sheikh Omar Suleiman is speaking about, okay, this is the conclusion, people. We've done all the research there was ever to do. And he says, we've done it, and we've ran 4 projects in parallel. They've been operationalized in parallel. And one of them came with a conclusion of saying, well, okay, maybe Aisha was of an older age, but all 3 overwhelmingly said that no, Aisha was definitely a young, she was 9. And then he said, well, in conclusion, look, people, that she is 9. It's not a laughing matter. I laugh, but honestly, I was so just disappointed. Sheikh Omar Suleiman who I have respect for as a person. He's done great social work. You know, he stands up for the rights of people. He, you know, puts his life on the line in America, standing up for the rights of black people, of Native Americans, of South Americans, all these kind of things, which is amazing, and may Allah bless him for that. But honestly, I was so disappointed with what Sheikh Omar Suleiman said here. That look, with all due respect, he said, like, this is what he said in the end of the khutbah. He said, look, people, don't reduce Aisha to a number. She was a person. Don't reduce her to a number. What on earth are you on about? Age is a number, goddammit. How can you, what do you mean, she's 9 years old, don't reduce her to a number? I mean, try that defense in court. You know, like, oh, well, Your Honor, don't reduce her to a number. No, mate, that is a sexual offense. You know, it's not like, what do you mean that don't reduce her to, of course, people are, your age, at that age, definitely these things. Okay, and here's my question. Here's my question to these people that want to support this narrative of saying the age of Aisha was so young. And what's wrong with that? This is what they're saying. I asked them, then okay, what's wrong with 4 or 3, marrying a 3-year-old? Or marrying a 2-year-old, what's wrong with that? What if a person said, oh, I won't sexually, there won't be no penetrative sex, I'll just fondle her, I'll just touch her. Would you be okay with that? And what if they said, don't reduce her to a number? I know she's 3, but don't reduce her to a number. She's a human being. Why is, of course it's goddamn disgusting. How, what does that mean? That how can it be that if the Prophet married this woman and she's 6 years old, that is a tiny girl. That's disgusting. That it did not happen. And this argument that, oh, if this was truly abominable and disgusting, then the Quraysh would have condemned the Prophet. Well, they didn't condemn him because it didn't happen. That's a stupid argument. Of course. That what does that even mean? Like, and you know, this like kind of nice Americanized kind of like all, you know, this kind of, oh, she's a human being, don't reduce her to a number. Like, what? I honestly, oh my God, I want to, this stuff enrages me. That sounds nice. I accept that sounds very cute when you're talking about adults. Not when you're talking about a kid. That cannot sound good in any way, in any capacity, in any shape. Then you can't. What is your? Then why 9? Why not 5? Why not 4? Why not 2? If a person says, okay, I won't have, like I said, if a person says, I'll just touch, I won't penetratively have sex with a child, I'll just touch. It's still disgusting. It's still an abomination. It's still, there's no, this kind of stuff. And then to say, well, look, and Sheikh Omar Suleiman said, well, I'm not saying you have to do it, and I'm saying you can have your own cultural practices, but it's not a moral judgment. Of course it's a moral judgment. Of course it's a moral judgment. What does that mean? What does that mean it's not a moral judgment? Of course it's a morality issue. It's an issue that it's a kid. What do you mean that's not morality? It's not a textbook issue, my friend. It is a morality issue. That is the slavery thing. You see, this is the irony that the reason, I'll tell you why these people are not saying that they're refusing to accept the age of Aisha to be high. I have a detailed video, showing that, first of all, and I will in future do on the actual hadith. In my video, I just show how the hadith were unacceptable. I don't go too much into the chains, but I will show that these few chains they have are all unreliable. All unreliable. The one by Urwa, the one from his son Hisham in Bukhari, the one in Muslim, they're all unreliable. But put that aside. Let's just take, look, the thing that did this for me clearly, the thing that did this for me is look at the narrative. Human beings, we can look at human lives and we can winnow out other things, and we can have a result. In the year of sorrow, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through the most tragic of his years, because he lost his wife Khadija, who was a support for him, and he had children at home. He had children, he had to look over them, he had lost his wife, he used to earn for the family, he's got that to worry about. His social protection came from his uncle Abu Talib radiallahu anh, and Abu Talib died in the same year, within months. And now so he became vulnerable to attacks, to boycotts. And then the Prophet goes to Ta'if and is humiliated and attacked. Now there's nothing more than that as a nail to seal that kind of depressive, catastrophic atmosphere for the Prophet. At this stage, he is approached by Khawla, and this is in the Sahih. This is a Sahih Hadith. He's approached by Khawla, who is like an aunt to the Prophet. She has a very maternal role in the Prophet's life. And she says to the Prophet, look, I see you very depressed. Why don't you marry? And the Prophet he says to her, well, who do you have in mind? And she says, I've got two people in mind. And one, she says, a young lady, and one, she says, somebody, a divorcee. And the Prophet says, well, who's the divorcee? And she says, Sauda. And the Prophet says, and who's the young lady? And she says, well, the daughter of your friend Abu Bakr, Aisha. So the Prophet sends a proposal to both. Now, let's just pause there for a moment. Aisha's doesn't go through immediately because she was already engaged. And hence the Prophet marries Sauda first, who was the Prophet's age. Now, let's just pause there for a moment. Khawla sees the Prophet depressed because of this tragic year. So she advises marriage. What could marriage do? Marriage could help the Prophet in 4 aspects. Okay. It could help the Prophet, first of all, by taking care of the home. A woman in the home could look over his children, help him with his children to free up some time and space for the Prophet. It could help. That's one way. Another way is there could be emotional support and companionship for the Prophet. He could find some solace with a wife. He could do that. That's another way. There could be intimacy. And with the emotional support, there could be intimacy and providing not only emotional support, but also peace, tranquility, and intimacy as well. Another way, right, that she could be it would free up time for the Prophet to be working. Okay, so the Prophet could go to work, he could do these things, and perhaps she could help the Prophet with the da'wah, with the mission. So these aspects are how a wife could have helped the Prophet at that time of tragedy. Now let's just take that into perspective. That's you don't need to be a genius to understand that. That's just common sense. That a wife coming could help you emotionally, she could give you intimacy, fine, that's excellent. She could take care of the kids, and she could help you in your da'wah. These are 4 key areas. Now, let's just go back to this picture that they're painting. The Prophet approaches Aisha, according to Bukhari, and she's 6. That's younger than his own children. What is the point of bringing another child home? Like, what was the point? Like, I know, I've got children to take care of. Let's just bring another child home. Well, she can't help you emotionally. She's younger than your own children. She's not incapable of intimacy. She can't really take care of the children. The children would do a better job of taking care of her. Some of the Prophet's kids were much older than Aisha at that stage, if she was 6. Right? And she definitely can't help with the da'wah. She's just a 6-year-old kid. So, in every way, that is a stupid suggestion. To say, well, I know, oh, you seem really stressed out. Why don't you just take another kid home and babysit that kid? That makes no sense. It makes no sense. Let alone now you look at the other evidences. And with that narrative in mind, you look at the hadith in Bukhari, how other people couldn't go to war. And Sheikh Omar Suleiman speaks on this as well, and other people. And they say, yeah, but you see, there's a difference because Aisha, when she was in war, when she went to the Battle of Badr or Uhud, when she participated in these battles, she was carrying water to the sick and the wounded and helping dragging bodies and stuff like this. She was attending the wounded. She wasn't fighting. And when Ibn Umar asks in Sahih Bukhari and the Prophet says no, and in the Battle of Uhud in Bukhari, he allows him by asking him, how old are you now? And he says, now I'm 15. And the Prophet says, okay. But he was going to fight. So they try to draw this distinction. But tell me, having a 14-year-old boy help drag bodies and carry water is much better than a 10-year-old girl. By any standard. On a battlefield, a boy that is 14 running around dragging bodies or bringing water is still much more helpful than a 10-year-old little girl. Everybody would agree. I mean, if you had a choice to say, well, all right, I've got to take, right, okay, I need somebody that can run fast, that can bring water, that can carry things, that can maybe bring armor, that can bring arrows, that can... Would you say, I know, I'll take that 10-year-old girl? Or would you take a 14-year-old boy? So the arguments don't match. And then the fact that Aisha was already engaged, and she'd been engaged for a few years to Jubayr ibn Mut'im. What was she, 2 when she got engaged? And then when Jubayr's family call off the engagement, what does Jubayr's mother say? She says, we don't want her because we're afraid she's going to convert our son. What, a 6-year-old's going to convert a man? Jubayr was a grown man. He's worried that a 6-year-old girl's going to convert him ideologically. At that time, when the Prophet approached her, she was at least 17. At least. That's what the maths show. Now, most people say, I mean, everybody pretty much accepts that Aisha passes away in 50 Hijri and she is 67 years of age. Now, you just work that backwards, and how old does that make her? So, and some people disagree, but they put it a bit forward, a bit back. But what I'm trying to say is, look at, even when you look at the maths. Now, then you've got hadith about Aisha saying things like, I remember when Surah Al-Qamar was revealed, this verse in Surah Al-Qamar, I used to be a young girl that could understand things. And that verse was revealed like something like 8 years before the Hijrah. And the word Jariya is used for a young girl, like somebody who's at least something like 10 onwards. And she says, Kuntu Jariya Aqil. I was a Jariya who could understand things. Yet and I just want to put all this aside and say, look, even if your research was like, and the only reason these people are not saying that Aisha was older, I'm telling you, wallahi, this is the only reason, is there's two things. This is for the sensible sheikhs, I'm saying. There's other idiots who are doing this just because they know it provokes the West. And that is the worst kind of people, right? And that is the worst kind of people. But these sheikhs are not doing it for that reason, inshallah, not like people like Sheikh Omar Suleiman or Yasir Qadhi and these kind of people. They're doing it just because they haven't got the courage to be because they don't feel they have a precedent. I guarantee you, if one Salafi sheikh had said this, just one, if they had the precedent, they just worried that we haven't got a precedent and our sect will kind of condemn us. That's all. Because if, let's say, Albani had said this, they would have all said it now. Because Albani had said it. It basically, all they need is somebody, like they don't have the courage to stand alone. And they need somebody that said it. So they're saying, yeah, but all the scholars in the past, I don't want to go against them. I don't want to go against all this number of scholars. But the truth is, this was not a debate back then. And people in the medieval ages, but let's just look at what all the scholars in the medieval ages said. They all said slavery was okay. they disagree today, they wouldn't dare say slavery is okay today. All the scholars in the past said slavery was fine. They said there's a consensus on this. They go against that. They say, well, oh yeah, but it's okay. No, and will they dare say slavery is not a morality issue? Of course it's a morality issue. So all the scholars, do you know what Ibn Taymiyyah writes? Ibn Taymiyyah writes that there is ijma. He says there is a consensus that if a Muslim, unlicensed, that means without permission of the imam or the leader of his state, sneaks into non-Muslim territory, whatever he steals, this is what he writes, whatever he steals, when he comes back is halal for him. He says because the kuffar have no indemnity when it comes to their wealth, when it comes to their property and stuff like this, because they are non-Muslims living in Dar al-Harb. He says there is ijma on this. You just have to Google it, it'll come right up. Ibn Taymiyyah's fatwa, that the wealth of all kuffar in their territory, so long as they don't have an agreement with us, right, in Muslim lands, is halal. So if anybody sneaks in, he can steal it. If he steals it and comes back, it's his. That is utterly haram. But Ibn Taymiyyah says there's ijma. Most scholars in the past would have thought that's fine. I wouldn't be surprised if almost all of them thought that. Because, you see, back then the world was a different place. They had dehumanized non-Muslims, just as non-Muslims had dehumanized Muslims. So, my point of saying this is just because the scholars in the medieval ages didn't say this, doesn't give you the license. And today this is such a big deal. And hadith are khabru ahad anyway. No hadith can provide certain knowledge. They are khabru ahad. So the honor of the Prophet is conclusive. If anything will bring a blemish to the honor of the Prophet and it is inconclusive, it's based on khabru ahad, we reject it. Let alone the fact that this argument has so many holes in this argument anyway. Right, so that's my point of making that. So I was really disappointed, honestly, in listening to, because I was kind of thinking, alhamdulillah, at least they've, derai durustai, that even though they've said this after a while, but alhamdulillah, at least now they're going to say as well openly that, look, we can't say stuff like this, there isn't enough evidence, there is problems in this chain and the honor of the Prophet and stuff like this. And they just came and said the same thing, that, oh no, she was 9, and the Prophet married her when she was 6, but hey, don't reduce her to a number. She was a human being. Well, Your Honour, and that, Your Honour, is my defence. I'd just like to say that how dare this court reduce these victims to a number? They were human beings, goddammit. Well, that obviously won't work well with the jury. So, look, I hope, inshallah, people can hear this message and, please, this is so disappointing. But yeah, let's, Amr ibn As got married young at the age of 9. Isn't that proof this was a norm? I'm not so sure where you've heard that about Amr ibn As. To be honest, I've not heard that. I know, generally speaking, the Arabs were not people of calendars. In fact, there's another interesting discussion. I'll bring that in, actually. This is a separate discussion. I was reading up some research just last week on this thing of nasi'. That, there's this verse in the Quran that إِنَّمَا النَّسِيء زِيَادَةٌ فِي الْكُفْرِ. That what was this nasi' about? That a nasi' was that the Arabs would move the months back and forth to justify fighting and stuff like this. But this research that I was reading, I don't know whether I'm necessarily convinced yet, but I'm definitely wowed and intrigued by what I was reading. So the person writes, it's an acad. I mean, he's like an ustad. I'm trying to, if I've got the book here somewhere. Nope, it's right. It's over there. Right. So, the person was writing that Nasi was actually a month. That it was like a month that the Arabs would introduce every 3 months or so to re-regulate and knock back the calendars. So the calendars would stay in line the way the Jews do it. So the Jewish calendars are also lunar, but they, since the time of Moses, I mean, and before that, they kept a lunar calendar, but they would they have a particular period where they, once again, the way we have a leap year, we have a leap day in February every so often to realign the solar calendar. They would have one every so often to realign the lunar calendar and to keep everything in line. Hence, that certain months would occur when it's spring, and certain things would occur when it's so on and so forth. And this, he was saying that, and it was quite interesting in this particular research that I was reading, that the Arabs used to do this, that innaman nasi, that this nasi that they would introduce every 3 years or so would re-regulate the calendar. And hence the 4 months that were sacred, Allah says, وَمِنْهَا أَرْبَعَةٌ حُرُمٌ, that fighting was declared haram in them. Why? You see, his angle was why fighting ought to be haram anyway. So why these 4 months only? Because these aligned with things like the periods of spring, and when people where it allowed animals to reproduce, it allowed, for example, certain crops, it allowed people to take care of these, knowing that there could not be any attacks and destruction. So in many ways, it kind of assured the perpetuation of society, the longevity, allowing nature to flourish, allowing animals to kind of breed and to have offspring, allowing these things, because otherwise, if neighboring tribes were always just fighting, but this way they weren't allowed, according to this theory, to kind of have any bloodshed during this, and they settled with that, and that would keep their survival, it would ensure their survival. So, but the only way this would happen, because the lunar months keep changing, but every 3 years they would have the Nasi, which would realign it. So spring and these, and Ramadan used to be in the Ramda, a particular heat that they used to face, and the month of Hajj would be in a particular season. That everything was, it was meant to be in line with certain seasons of the year. But he said that according to his research, I was reading this last week, that that this continued up until the time of Umar, and in his time, his caliphate, that there were certain Jewish people that the Muslims had employed as well to look over the calendar and look over certain things. But this got dropped and they were sacked and removed. And then there was just a lot of issues in the Muslim world. There were things like, obviously, expansion, making Muslims migrate, setting up new cities. Then the time of Uthman comes, and you've got things like, obviously, favoritism and nepotism and all these things kick in, and whether that is an issue or not, and tribalism, and then fighting, Ali's time, and then the time of civil war and diversity. And so Muslims got so distracted that they never really thought about the Nasi, because the Nasi was something that would occur only once every 3 years. It wasn't something on an annual basis. And so that's interesting. It got me kind of thinking that that's a very fascinating theory. And he said, and later generations kind of forgot about it because they were never part of that. But my reason for saying this is that, and then later Muslims kind of came up with things like, oh, this is more awesome that we have a lunar cycle like this, because this way Ramadan gets to be on every day of the year. And they came up with their own reasons. But initially, you see, because if you look at the Jewish people today, they still regulate their lunar cycle. They don't move around every year like that, because every so often they have these kind of leap sections to realign everything. And they were the people of calendar and of book, before the Arabs were not a people of book per se, or of the book. Now, see, the reason I'm saying this is because the Arabs weren't so well at documenting age and documenting things like this. So that's why I'm not. But one thing for sure, one thing I know for sure, is that yes, people throughout history did marry young, but they married young like girls would be probably anything like 12, 13, 14, like that. So usually a girl developing, the visible thing can come down to two things that are perceptible: the menarche, the onset of the menstrual cycle, and thalaki, the onset of the breasts. These are things which become visible signs of a girl becoming nubile and stuff like this. Now, people generally throughout history did marry much younger than they do today, but the onset of the menarche and the thalaki, things like this, has always, in fact historically, has been later than it is today. Today, the menarche in some very developed countries, or in countries with genetically modified food like America, is like 10 and a half. On average, it's 11, 12. That's the average age. And with thalaki as well, 12 onwards. And this is what you find the practice. So even, people say, oh, my own grandmother or great-grandmother married when she was 14 and stuff like this. And that was the case, but they weren't marrying 6-year-olds. That is for sure. People generally, I'm not saying nobody in society ever in history never did these kind of atrocities, but humanity in general did not see a 6-year-old girl as a wife. That is just a fact. I mean, that did not happen, especially in the Arab cultures. So when people keep saying people marry young, that's a misleading argument. They did marry young, but not the way what you mean by young. They didn't marry like 2-year-old babies, and they didn't marry 6-year-old girls either. Yes, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, and that is young by modern standards, but it wasn't like a 6-year-old girl or a 5-year-old girl. That's my point. Okay. Whew. Wow, all right, really got into that. Okay, let's take some rapid round, people, and then we'll wrap this up. Let's see what were some of the questions that people had posted. Otherwise, they're gonna say that oh damn. Oh, right. Oh god, I'm trying to get to this and it's so right. Okay, I can't see what's going on. Sorry, people. Just me and my. Oh, right. Also to mention, there was. Oh, right. I've got this. Okay. Let's take a look at some of these questions. Salam, Sheikh. What's your advice on amulets that has Quran verses in it? All right. Sharjil. Ahlan wa sahlan. Shireen. Ahlan wa sahlan. People. All right. Those of you just tuning in, click like, click share, people. Right, so amulets, first of all, amulets, these kind of things to me are really all folkloric religion, aspects of superstition. I don't see any reason to be doing stuff like this. Don't get me wrong, people do it all the time. But these things are counter reason. They don't make any sense. Why do you need a lucky charm? It's, in all honesty, your little, like if I said this chain was a lucky chain, it brings me good luck. It doesn't. There's nothing, it brings me protection. The amulet can't even protect itself. What's it gonna, and all it does is it breeds a culture of fear. Let's say one day you don't have that amulet on you. You will become all kind of freaked out. So this is why I say stay well away from this kind of stuff. I see it as superstition. I see it as anti-tawheed. And it is a huge money-making scam. Right, somebody had asked, Salam,
what are the rules of Zawaj, Mut'a, Misyar? Whoa, all in one. Right, people, what are the rules of I accept. Right, so all right, we'll come to that in a moment. Somebody had asked, what was the ants? Did Solomon Ahmed Deen, could Sulaiman alayhi salam listen to ants? Zulayha, oh, doing it, you're doing it. Talha, Osama, ahlan wa sahlan, people. Right, so could Sulaiman alayhi salam listen to ants? He couldn't listen to ants like the way people think. Okay, so this is what people think happened. Sulaiman alayhi salam, the Quran quotes that he is informed or made aware of this communication of the ants, and the ants simply saying, like, highlighting danger. So the ants warning one another. It is true that ants have one of the most complex hierarchical systems in the animal kingdom, and ants have to some extent, one could argue, predated humans in plant domestication and even animal domestication to some extent, because ants have the way they take away plants, and they've even taken away certain they take away it's like these kind of parasites that they take away, like these small creatures that they then have known to domesticate and even take care of some. So it's really intriguing that they predate human civilization, because the human agricultural civilization is really at most about 10,000 years old post the Ice Age, just ending about 12,000 years ago. So they predate humans in plant domestication and in animal domestication to many. So that's intriguing, and they do have communication, but not how we think. Like, they don't talk like how we talk. Like, don't sit down and have a dialogue. Ants don't communicate, but they have methods of communication. That is true. So the ants and animals do warn each other against things. That is true. So the ants warning certain ants of danger is brought to the attention of Sulaiman alayhi salam, which he finds fascinating. Now, and he kind of smiles and starts laughing over this. The Quran highlights that. Now, did this mean that as he was riding his his whole kind of chariot and the whole armies are coming, or however he was on horseback, and now does that mean his hearing zoomed in, and now he could hear a dialogue of the ants? Of course not. That's not, I mean, you can believe that. I mean, you can believe whatever you want, but that's not how it, because that would be crazy. That would mean he's hearing everything. He's hearing microscopic kind of just waves, and he's hearing all these other little creatures and flies buzzing, and he's hearing everything, and he's just going deaf with all of this. That's not how, no human does that. I mean, Sulaiman alayhi salam wasn't doing that either. But what it is that he was made aware of this. So he is told, and it's interesting because even when you look at the verse after it, this was like an intuitively, as an inspiration, he was made aware of this through ilham. And hence he says in the verse after it that alhimni, that about ilham, that make us be grateful by inspiring us further, by giving us ilham further, and awzi'ni and ashkur ni'mat, that inspire me more intuitively through divine inspiration to be grateful. So that is how he saw this. I mean, that's what seems to be very clear from the verse. You could take the fact that, oh no, he
it doesn't say anywhere that he directly heard this, because ants don't speak like that anyway. They don't speak per se. But he was inspired about this warning that an ant was giving, like watching out for his own. And it made him laugh that, look, at that level how people watch out when it comes to their kingdom, and how his kingdom was of a magnificent nature. So it was amazing, and in many ways it made him laugh, but it was a humbling experience, that if ants at that level can look out for one another, that you, with all this majesty, have a greater responsibility to look over your subjects with compassion. So I think that's the understanding. Okay, just to right now. Okay, let's take some. Right, there was a question on. I've answered that before. People get all excited. Mut'a, what is it? Zawaj. Zawaj means marriage. Mut'a means a temporary marriage. Misyar is the Sunni version of mut'a. It's all, you know what it is? Life is just one long, complicated mating process. That is all it is, isn't it? And everything else is just getting in the way, and it's just it's just one long, very complicated mating process. That's all it is. And everybody's trying to make certain ways and avenues, and right, and so the Sunni scholars are like, oh, we haven't got a mut'a, so I know, let's create our version called misyar. And look, relax. People who do these things. My point is, as I've said in the past, if two adults, consenting adults, want to have a relationship, that's absolutely their business. Okay, that is not anybody else's business. And if they choose to have a short-lived relationship, or if their relationship seems to go on, that's entirely their choice. Nobody can force a relationship upon another, whether it be man or woman. Nobody can be compelled or forced to be in a relationship against their will. So that's another thing I'd like to advise on there, that sometimes, men do have this thing as well, that you'll speak to certain men and they'll say, well, if my wife wants a divorce, she needs a valid, like they'll say valid reason, but by valid they'll put the bar like that high, and they'll say there must be domestic violence, or there must be this, or there must be that. And if provided there isn't, so they'll say provided there is no domestic violence, or there is none of this, and if I am prepared to pay for the house, then she can't leave. This is what people think. And that's wrong, my friend. That one not correct. So that is force. They need to understand this. You cannot force somebody to be in a relationship. I had a conversation with somebody, and he said, "No, I'm not forcing her. I'm just saying she can't leave." I said, "No, that is force." He said, "No, I never said force. I would never say force." I said, "I know you're not saying force, but you're forcing." So some people think as long as they don't use the word force, that can't be force in any manifestation, which is so crazy. So listen, just as a man, like I've asked these people, okay, let's say you wanted to leave the relationship, could you leave it? And they've said, yeah. So I've said, well, so can she. And by the way, the Malikiya, the school of Medina, says that any person that has tadarrur, that has any kind of harm in a relationship, and that does obviously includes physical harm, but it also includes emotional, it includes psychological, it includes mental, it includes any kind of, if they felt that they were harmed and they did not want to be in a relationship, they can leave. This is not to encourage people to break families down, but what I'm saying is that if it's not working for one person, You see, a relationship consists of two people. If one is out, the relationship collapses. It's not up to the other person to say, well, I don't want them out. That doesn't work like that. So just to clarify that, because I think that point needs to be reminded time and time again. Because the amount of times I've had discussions with people and they've been like, yeah, but for my wife to leave me, she must have a reason, that is that I've beat the hell out of her. I said, well, right. Have you been reading like a wrestling manual? I don't know where you got your... Is that like in the Assassin's Creed of how to give talaq? Like, I don't know how that... A woman can equally apply for a talaq, right? So that... And this is not to say that she should or he should. A relationship, alhamdulillah, if it works, that's amazing, and it should work, or they should try to make it work. But if it doesn't, all I'm trying to say is that it is equal for a man or a woman, that they cannot be forced to be in a relationship, that they can leave the relationship if they felt. It's just to know that, to know your rights. That's all. I'm not saying you need to be doing that. I'm not saying you're just going to sit there one day. And you know, like somebody said to me once, huh? So you're trying to say, Annie, that if a woman can just say, okay, one day just say, okay, I'm divorcing. I'm going to apply for divorce. Huh? And she should get a divorce. I was like, well, I'm sure that's not quite how it goes. I'm sure there's like a whole season of what happens prior to that. I'm sure like somebody doesn't just wake up one day and say, what shall I do today? You know, I'm a bit bored today. You know, I know, I'll apply for a divorce. I'm sure that never happens. So, you know, you don't need to worry about somebody just applying because they had nothing better to do. It's like, oh, what shall I do? I mean, I could go there, but there's a queue. I could go shopping, but then, you know, the weather ain't all... I know, I'll just apply for a divorce. Like, that never happens. So I said, look, you can calm yourself. If somebody is opting for a divorce, it's only because things have happened, right? So that's my advice, if I can give people some advice. But by all means, do try to make things work. I mean, do try communication. Sometimes space is fundamental, and sometimes things won't work. And if they don't work, a person's measure is not by their success or lack of in relationships. You know, you are not a successful person or a failure because you're not married or you're divorced. Although today society is judging people like that. But yeah, so I thought I just got to, they say they go to a Sharia court where they'll just say, no, I mean, if they do look at things, there are, you're right, there ain't that many of these Sharia councils anyway, and they're notorious. But there are some, like the Islamic Council UK and others, that are very helpful. But my point of saying this is it's just to highlight the rights that people have, that's all. On that note, I was going to say as well, some people had asked me and they spoke to me about certain cases and things. You know, with social media and young people, so if any young people are watching this, I want to kind of give them some advice. They can chuck this in the bin if they want later on, but seriously, my advice that, look, be a bit wary of things of putting things on social media, certain things that are very, you know, like some people, like I saw this one clip of this woman or this girl and some guy on I think it was Instagram or something, but it was one of those, it was a viral kind of clip where this person's come on live with this guy who's just roasting her, completely humiliating her and demeaning her, really. Like, who the hell are you that, you know, basically you're just good for, you know, that, and not even like in a respectable way. You just like, I would just come and then I wouldn't want to know you, and, you know, guys, you're just like there to be used by. And the girl was just gladly kind of just, I don't know about gladly, but she was just participating in this, taking this. And I was thinking, why are you disrespecting yourself? Like, don't, allow yourself, because social media will retain that record. No, these clips, these are on all these, you know, on Instagram, you have these Asian pages. So they have these, like, I forgot now, but there's a lot of these Asian where they have like kind of banter and memes and stuff like that. So I saw it on Instagram. But my point is that I have spoken to certain people as well in cases. Look, people, look, in all society, we are living in a hypersexualized society, okay? And whether we accept it or not, but people are having sex anyway all the time out there. And young people, all people are having a lot of people, okay, let me put it like that, a lot of people are having that, which that's a different discussion, which I've got to talk on marriages, relationships and zina and the complexity of these things in our day and age, and why religion with a capital R hasn't produced or is not giving a solution to people. But that's a different discussion. But what's happening in some of these things is when people are partaking in these sexual activities, they're recording themselves, right? So the guy, the girl, and then this is viral, or this is now preserved, archived by the internet. I mean, I would just say, look, people are going to do what they're going to do, okay? People out there are going to be in the relationships they're going to be in. But just, I would advise people that, look, have some foresight that you owe it to yourself in the future. Because these kind of things in the future may cause, and like I was saying, I'm privy to several cases where they have caused huge complications in later relationships, where people have found videos online of, let's say, their to-be wife, or even husband, doing all these things with all these other people. And then that's devastated their relationship. It's destroyed it immediately. Now, what I'm trying to say is that just have some self-awareness that you owe it to your future self to be conscientious, I mean, people are going to do what they're going to do. They know what's right and wrong, but they're going to do that anyway. But what you don't need to do is humiliate yourself further by recording something in in HD. Can it be 4K? And then uploading it, or the other person uploading it onto the internet. And these things, it's sad really, because I mean, it hits everybody, but it hits women worse. Just the way society is, it hits women worse. And you have people where these things surface years later, that years and years, and sometimes they've got children and stuff like this. And how do they show it to their children? Sometimes discover what somebody else, what they, and it's just, all I'm saying is, I understand that these things are mistakes, but just be wary. Like, people are going to do what they're going to do anyway. If I say to people, don't be involved in these relationships, they're going to be involved anyway. But if they're going to, I can't control people, or nobody can control people. People are going to do what they're going to do, but don't let other people exploit you. Don't allow people to make recordings. Don't allow these kind of things, okay? That's my advice. And be very wary what you allow, what you share with other people. If you're sharing, if people are sharing things like all kind of nude images and stuff, and then people are putting this onto the internet, and then once again it has a devastating comeback. So cool. So I mean, that's my somebody said, Grandpa found a clip of you twerking. Yeah, but that wouldn't be, so that was some serious in other words, do badmashi in secret. In other words, just let Allah, between you and God. You don't need to bring the whole world into this. No, so that's my point, that look, people are going to do things anyway. You see, I could stand here and say, don't do these things, don't do these things, don't do these things. But in another clip, I've gone in great detail to highlight how, in all honesty, I could preach, but the truth is, nobody has a solution to what's going on anyway. We don't have solutions. To say just get married isn't a solution. in many cases, because marriage isn't practical in many situations. So what do we have? That's a different discussion. I'm not trying to condone. I know, some of my my friends will say, take this clip out, and I'm not condoning and saying these things are permissible, but what I'm saying is that it's really unfortunate that the way society has formed and the way the religious people have formed, they haven't given options to people. It doesn't have to be young people, but all kinds of people. And yes, in the past I've said things like, well, people have said, well, what about things like mut'a, like short-term relationships and things like this? And I think that would be at least some kind of a recourse for people. It would be something. It would be a beginning. But the point is, nobody really cares. And the scholars will do their things in private anyway. These Maulvis that are telling off all these other people, they're all doing their stuff anyway. And they've all got their secret marriages going on and all this stuff, and they're just preaching. And this is another thing that's disheartening. So that's my but I mean, mut'a, they could that's something. I mean, what I'm trying to say is at least there's some discussion, there's a dialogue on this. Right now we're not even recognizing the problem. We're just like, what problem? There is no problem. There is no problem. There are no homosexuals in Iran. Remember that lecture where Ahmadinejad, where he said that what homosexual? There are no homosexuals in Iran. Right, so that's my point. And my point was, if people are going to do that anyway, then at least have some dignity, have some respect to yourself first. To God, to your family, to your future family. Don't show them all your talent. Then the husband will be like, yeah, here she's a very, what's that, Sati Savart, what's the Savitri, Sati Savitri, a very plain Jane here, and yeah, on this clip, seems to be very creative here. People, with that, I'm going to leave you to it, man. Zulayha is saying you should come on my live sessions to speak on this. Sure, inshallah, sometime. But be wary, I am radioactive. My presence will immediately blacklist you. So, but cool. People, take very good care of yourselves, inshallah. As always, it's a pleasure. It's an honor to, inshallah, share these moments and words. Inshallah, stay blessed, people. Have an awesome time. Live, love, learn, and laugh, people. Laugh. That's the cure to things. Inshallah, much love. Take very good care of yourselves. Till next week. Salamu alaikum.